Alrighty, that's all it takes. I don't get notifications anymore as to when this thing begins, so I'm live right now. As far
We'll
as
see.
I didn't want to click that one. That's the wrong one.
I just got a notification from the YouTubes.
Oh yeah, wow, well that's encouraging. Meaningless, but no. I'm just kidding.
Meaningless, but encouraging, nonetheless.
So we got a viewer.
A viewer, welcome viewer.
We got one entity, alleged entity, that is desperately trying to figure out when middle age begins, because this entity that's viewing us right now is probably close to our age and is like, whoa. Oh, via the Discord.
Yeah.
That's how, yeah, I just set that up recently.
I went there.
Homestead Bound Bear says, I'm not really here. Well, that sounds highly philosophically confusing. Xander Beat, welcome, and I'm not familiar with your, I don't think I've seen you before. So welcome, Xander Beat. Figment of my imagination. Can you read? Can you?
No, not at all. I didn't bring my glasses up here, so
life.
as I stated, middle age problems, right? So
Yes, because if I take, I'm sitting like what is this? 30 inches.
yeah,
I'm sitting 30 inches away, and I can read it, but it's very blurry. It's much better with my corrective lenses here.
Needed for middle age.
All right, so Homestead Bound Bear says, and I'm definitely not almost 40, which is a great starting point for the topic of
the deranged ramblings of two middle-aged men.
At what point do you actually enter into middle age? It's a debatable topic. Well, if adolescence is going up into the upper 20s, if maybe even into the 30s these days, does that mean that middle age is getting pushed from the what used to be known as the 40s and 50s?
Well, that depends on when you have your midlife crisis.
Yeah.
I mean, if you never have a midlife crisis, do you even have a middle age?
Don't forget, this is your personal.
Sorry. I got
He has a personal camera, and this is another one of those opportunities where I'm able to what green screen. What has happened is I have green screened my background into his reality, and I've been able to.
This is like if you've gotten to the new Star Wars movie, how they can just pass items to them each other through time and space. We figured it out.
Wait, what was that movie? The one where he's like gets stuck in the 5th dimension or 12th dimension, and do you know it was Matthew McConaughey movie?
Oh yeah. I know which one you're talking about, where he is like communicating with his family like through moving a book on a bookshelf and like
because he's stuck in a different.
Wasn't it called like Transcendence or something like that? Or
no. Oh man,
it was a complete mind warp though.
It was an interesting movie. I have another topic randomly that hit my brain, but I still want to talk about the midlife thing because it's a little interesting. It's supposed to be Bear. Xander Beat is supposed to be Xander Bear. Got it. I haven't changed it yet, but it's good to be here. Welcome, Sylvia. Hold on, I'm gonna do this. Sylvia. It is Sylvia. Sylvia Gisgerbar. But maybe that is just a label, midlife, the middle age thing. Yeah. Is he old enough to have bought it himself? What? This is what happens when you don't address a comment right away and you say a lot of things. Old enough to have bought it himself. Do you remember?
Beer?
Camera. Is somebody old enough to have bought a camera himself?
Who's the he word referencing? Midlife crisis? Is that what we're talking about?
I don't understand the Is he old enough to have bought the camera himself? Oh, are you suggesting that the Breath of Fresh Bear here, aka Charles, looks young enough to not be a able to buy a camera? You look really young on camera, bro.
Do I?
Actually, you kind of do. I am looking. You look pretty young because you're like a little smaller and stuff.
He
And
said, "Who's this guy?"
who is this guy? This is Charles, aka Breath of Fresh Bear.
Yep, I run my own YouTube channel and I do conspiracy theory videos and all kinds of fun jazz and Bible studies and farm unity stuff. All kinds of homesteading and yeah, it's just a conglomerate channel full of whatever pops into my brain when I feel like posting videos, which is probably about once a month at this point because that's when I have time to do it. But yeah, that's my channel, Breath of Fresh Bear. You can feel free to go check it out. So yeah, and I am not young enough to not be able to buy a camera. So
yeah, that was a lot of negatives, but I get what you're saying. Apparently, Homestead Bound Bear was attempting to make a joke, which I am the worst possible candidate for trying your jokes out on, due to the autist spectrum that I play around on in life and in communication with others. It doesn't work very well. That jokes, those things.
wait, is Fighting Bear the same Fighting Bear that's on the
Yeah.
YouTube Fighting Bear? Yeah, what's up, buddy?
He's on YouTube. He's also in the thing that we ought not speak of.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
But you know the
He who shall not be
gravy,
named.
the gravy
Yeah,
trough.
yeah. He who shall not be named.
Yeah.
The group that shall not be named.
The group that shall not be named as the gravy trough. It's all good. It's fine. Everything is fine. All right. So yeah, sorry I missed the joke, but I was just joking that he had a camera that he could look into that was pointed at him. That was my main point. When you buy your own stuff, you're almost middle-aged these days.
Touche. That's a very descriptive way to put it.
Yeah, independence. You want to say that independence is what adulthood is all about, and middle-aged.
I mean, my kids are going to be middle-aged at like 17, so.
Oh my, what?
It's
what, because they're going to be buying their own stuff.
Yeah. I mean, my kid already buys his own stuff.
Yeah,
so
I
like,
hear you.
he goes out and shovels snow and stuff when he wants to make money now. So like, he's like, I'm not waiting for you to give me an allowance. I'm going to go out and make my own money so I can buy my own stuff. And I'm like,
so
see ya.
But here's my understanding. This is an unofficial answer, but I think it's actually close to probably the more actual answer to this middle age question. When does middle age begin? Far as I understand, actual middle age is the point at which your children are leaving the household. That's how I understand middle age to be, when your children are leaving the household, and that's the next stage of life. Early adulthood is
some people don't hit it middle age till like 65.
I know. Yeah. But it's a true transitional period, and that's why the midlife crisis happens, is because people don't.
Well, they've spent most of their adult lives like raising kids and
children. They
and
didn't get to know their spouse. I just talked about this the other day, interestingly enough, and I was like, I'm going to spend more time with my wife than even my 3 children put together, because I'm going to be with her after they're gone. So, Lord willing. So, I want to spend.
Well, unless my wife walks in front of a bus, that's my plan too. So.
Your plan is to walk in front of a bus?
No, unless she walks in front of a bus, my plan is to be with her well after my children are gone.
Yeah. Let's stay away from buses.
Yeah, don't let your wives walk in front of buses, guys. It's bad deal.
It's really bad.
Basically, just don't let your wife out of the house.
Yeah.
That's good rule of thumb.
I mean, we wouldn't be able to be accused of that, would we?
Never. My wife doesn't leave the house. I mean, leaves the house whenever she wants
to. Whenever.
Yeah,
whenever they want. You don't need approval. They don't ask permission.
Never.
Oh boy, this is a really.
That went downhill quick.
This is a really bad stream. This is, people on YouTube joke about, oh, this is going to be demonetized. Obviously, never going to be a problem for me. And I do say never.
If my channel ever gets monetized, I'll be more shocked.
Yes. Yeah.
The
Absolutely.
threat of being demonetized isn't even ever there.
Is a joke to me.
Yeah.
So the am I a joke to you? Dash demonetization. Or maybe the other way around. No, demonetization. Anyway, I'm getting really confused.
My
Um,
son uses that all the way,
so
all the time. By the way,
am I a joke to
am
you?
I a joke? He thinks it's
So
hysterical.
it is. I really like it. Still being a teenager, I feel it's more mental. Yeah, Xander Bear. I maybe, but I think that there is a demarcation point. I'm using good old fashioned telephone terms there. Well, there's probably other uses of demarcation. Is that a term that's exclusive to the telephone industry?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Anytime that you cross a, even in routing technology, there's demarcation zones.
Okay. So
So
I've done a lot of jobs, and sometimes I wonder if the words I use are known by the masses. But I think that there is a demarcation point, and I think it's when the last child leaves the house, and that's when you enter into middle age, and that can be, I guess, as early as your late 30s. It could be as late
but
as
what if there's a scenario where
your
you
60s.
never got married,
Uh huh. Sure, singles.
right? So,
Well, that's the thing. They don't go through the same transition. They don't.
but no, that they hit a point where they're like, does my life have meaning? So
So
it's a
the
different.
self-evaluation thing can happen at any stage, I think.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying, like, when you get to a point where you're like, so I've had a career, I've educated myself, I've got all these things, I've got a good career now, I'm in my early mid 30s, I'm not married yet, I don't have any dependents, my parents are dead, I don't have any siblings, I got this awesome career, I spent all this time being educated, but now what am I doing with it? That's a good point for a midlife turnaround.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the parents because that just brought to mind the whole aspect of those who are taking care of their elderly. The next stage of life after midlife is to nearing the end of your life. So the elderly, taking care of the elderly is, I think, another stage uh, uh, characteristic of midlife. When your own parents are in their elderly stage, you
You're definitely in your midlife.
should be. The interesting aspect to that.
As if your elderly parents are still taking care of you.
Well, there's that, but then there's situations like my wife's father passed away very young in
At least we're
life.
not meeting at McDonald's at 6. That's an elderly trait. That's an elderly trait.
Yeah,
Meeting at McDonald's at 6 a.m. is definitely an elderly trait.
it is an elderly thing.
Middle-aged people don't have time for that.
No, because they're in the peak of their career allegedly. I wouldn't know anything about that.
I'm in the beginning of all of everything, all the time. I'm always in the beginning stages.
I'm starting over so much. I'm never going to be in the middle of my career. It's just I'm never going to hit.
When I get to start Farmunity and actually get it moving and going and have land and build stuff, that is going to be the beginning of my final career. So
Yeah,
like honestly, because I'm gonna die on that hill. That's my
but
hill.
you could spend 50 years on that.
Literally, that's going to be the hill that I die on.
That could be a 50-year thing.
Yeah,
But it's not a job. It's not a career. It's a lifestyle. And
could be.
so I have a lot of ideas I'd like to talk about that. But we probably need to assemble. Well, I don't know. We just talk about it. Doesn't matter. So random thing popped into my head here. You saw the movie Inception.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I just had this crazy idea the other day.
That we should do Inception.
No.
Dang it. I was hoping you had that figured out because that'd be
that
super
Inception
cool.
Was a conspiracy. Not a yeah, it was a conspiracy programming movie to program here's my conspiracy. I'll rephrase this sentence because I'm just butchering
You botched it from the beginning. Let's start over.
I have a conspiracy that Inception is a propaganda programming film that gets people to doubt the still small voice in their head by demonizing that still small voice Inception as most likely something that will just make you kill yourself and uh, and is evil
And
from the get
or
go
is just a subconscious idea that was rooted in your brain
from
sometime
somebody else,
from some
from a
other
human,
source
from a
on
human.
Earth.
Yeah. Thanks for chiming into my conspiracy.
Yeah,
That,
I mean, I just
but
clarifying.
you picked it up, and you knew exactly where I was going
Yeah,
with that, and it hit me because I've always looked at that movie. Always, it's been out for
10 years now. Ish.
well, no, I guess 10 years,
It's
something
probably
like that.
somewhere in the range of 10 years.
He wrote that he took 10 years to write it. I respected Christopher Nolan for the work. It's a good work. It's a nicely written thing. But then all of a sudden, I got this creepy feeling that Inception might just be what I just explained. And I had vaguely mentioned this to Devin Stack on Blackpilled's channel, asking him to see if he could maybe address the topic. But he's got probably a laundry list of different films and TV shows he wants to break down. So it'd be a good one for him to break down if he could, because he's known as the dude. Charles did pick up what I was putting down. So Devin Stack is known as the dude that ruins everybody's movies for them. Like, you can no longer enjoy, except
The Matrix, I still thoroughly enjoy.
he didn't ruin Office Space. He actually lifted it up in lots of ways. It was really cool. It's not a subversive film at all.
No,
Well,
and I think
all,
The Matrix was more of a blowing the lid off of things more than anything.
Yeah,
like this entire world that you think you exist in has been fabricated for you, and you literally are buying into it. Like it was the literal, like the first one, anyways. I don't know about the
number
other,
2 and 3 were they had
very sodomy vibes to them, but the first one was very prominently just blowing the lid off the whole. The world is pretend, and you've bought into it. Type of an argument. So, like,
did you hear that? Thank you for the shekel.
But his explanation of it did nothing to ruin it for me at all. So, I actually thoroughly still enjoy that movie because you do, like, you are really honestly faced with some point in your life.
You do have a couple over there
where you have a choice to either take a red pill or a blue pill and be like, wait a minute, this is fishy. Something about this doesn't add up. And you're either going to choose to go deeper and look into it and risk exposing what you've believed your entire life to be false, or you're just going to be like, no, that's too crazy. I'm just going to be okay with what I've been told my whole life, and I don't even want to know.
Xander Bear says Mike Judge is a very down-to-earth person. I bet he's a secret bear. Mike Judge is the one that did those cartoons, but did he? I think wasn't he associated with Idiocracy? I don't know that Mike Judge was associated with. Well, definitely not the Matrix, but I think Mike Judge did do something with Idiocracy. And he's the Simpsons guy.
I thought he was the one that did like he's done a bunch of the like dystopian open your eyes stuff. Like
Mike Judge? Hold on. Mike Judge, I thought was the Simpsons dude. Am I having a seizure right now? Let's see here. Michael Craig Judge.
Beavis and Butthead.
IMDb. It's always the fastest. Oh, so he did do Beavis and Butthead. He did do Office Space. Okay.
Yeah, that's
Office
what the reference
Space.
was.
That's right. King of the Hill. So Simpsons, I am having a seizure.
I thought I'd heard that name before because Mike Judge was also a person that was brought up a lot in the.
No,
he was.
I was right. He did do Idiocracy. He did Office Space and Idiocracy.
Well, he was actually one of the people that they. He was one of the original directors that was actually supposed to be involved in the American version of The Office. They pitched it to him first, and he said, "No, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. I can't do it justice."
Did you know supposedly Will Smith was asked to be the leading role in The Matrix?
Really?
You know how crazy of a movie, how different that movie would have been?
Rather than Keanu Reeves?
Yeah.
I feel like the entire cast would have had to been different then.
You know, like Halle Berry instead of whoever did it.
No, I mean, like, Morpheus probably would have been a different character. They probably wouldn't have, like,
Oh, Morpheus. Yeah, well, I thought of Morpheus probably being the same character and him playing a fatherly role differently than the Neo and Morpheus thing, but
see, I
I
feel like they would have gone with, like, uh, for lack of a better
it's
person.
a weird thought experiment to think about how that movie would be with Will Smith instead of Keanu
Because
Reeves.
you got to think of the time frame in which it was
Would they
made,
have made
too.
Will Smith a hacker? You know, like because that's what Keanu Reeves was.
Right. Well,
So
that's what I
that's
mean.
I
But
don't
like
know.
the whole casting would have had to have gone different then because like
Yeah.
you got to look at the social aspect of it too. Like with how the culture viewed interracial marriage at the time, like interracial relationships. With
Yeah.
a black person having authority over a white person, like how would that have all been viewed by the public?
You
Like,
talking about The Matrix,
yeah,
1999?
that's what I mean. But like the whole like in your face like racial thing didn't start happening until like the late
So
2000s.
we just watched Head of State last night. Head of State was came out in 2003, 5 years before Obama.
Which was Chris Rock.
Chris, exactly. So you're familiar, but
Yeah.
Chris Rock
But I just mean
is.
like with the seriousness of the movie, like with the message they were trying to
Oh,
portray. Like
I know what you mean, but I
what happened?
Xander Beat just followed, and it plays a really awesome tune.
Yeah.
So when anybody subscribes or when anybody follows or when anybody does a lemon donation,
Illuminati. Nice.
um, Bear Minotti, I saw that. So any donations, I've linked up a special sound and a special message for when anybody does those things, just to because it's fun.
But that's what I mean. But like culturally, like a lot of these like mainstream like this is okay behavior now. Like that's what makes me think back to being like I couldn't remember whether it was mid 90s or late 90s, but late 90s it
Here's
probably would have been
here's
fine.
where I was going with Head of State and the fact that of how you don't. Okay, so when Obama got elected, I don't think that it was mainstream where everybody's like, "Oh yeah, they're definitely legalizing gay marriage like any day now."
Mm-hmm.
Like in 2008, right? Well, Chris Rock's character in the movie as he's running for president, and Chris Rock's character, his own out of his own volition when he goes out of the constraints of what they were telling him to say, he's saying, "Yeah, gay people should definitely get married." Chris Rock, who 5 years later, the real first black president, quote unquote, because allegedly Bill Clinton was the. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
He's the one. I think he's the one. There people said that about Bill Clinton for real though. But anyway, I found it very weird that there were so many parallels in that movie, in ways that seem Simpsonish in the predictive. Like it makes it look like either they're almost on prophet level prophecy and foretelling of the future, or somebody's in control.
So that's also one of the things that's very fascinating to think about. Especially like because we talked about like earlier today in our Bible study, how um, weird it is that somebody would say that they were talked to by the Holy Spirit or a spirit or so on and so forth. But it's like, well, if that doesn't agree with the truth of the scriptures, then you might want to check what spirit's giving you information. And a lot of the famous people and writers and song artists and things of that nature all say that, that they get their inspiration from somewhere other than themselves. When they're inspired to write music or write movies or songs or whatever, like they get the ideas from another entity. So it makes me wonder, like, so God has a timeline. Are they privy to that timeline? Do they know these things that are going to happen? Like
Who is they in this?
these other entities, these other spiritual entities. Are they privy to that timeline that they know what's going to happen, and then that's how they're giving these people these heads up as to how these things are going to happen and how they're going to play out, or these events that are going to happen, or again, are they planning those events to happen years in advance to try to get that timeline to come into play?
Yeah, yeah. Who is pulling any strings at all, and how that's taking place is definitely a big mystery. Um, Now, Charles mentioned um, the concept of farm immunity, which I've discussed a couple of times. There's a playlist, an educational playlist on my YouTube channel. If you go to my channel and then you click playlists, you'll find one that's titled Farm Unity. If you don't want to go to my channel, you can go to YouTube and type the word Farm Unity.
And you're either going to get his channel or mine, because we're the only two people that reference
it's a word that we made up, so that makes it a lot easier to search. So you look up Farm Unity on YouTube and you'll find a playlist. I don't know how many videos are on there. It's probably close to 100, maybe over 100 at this point. I keep adding stuff regularly every time I see a new thing that I think might be helpful, whether it's gardening or gaining confidence and competence regarding foundation work, framing, insulation, the aspects of building homes, obviously. The Matrix story was stolen from an old female bike thief. Interesting. So Homestead Bound Bear is saying that there was some. So, for instance, this, I don't know if you can see this here, the gospel and then the bear emoji. That's what it looks like when they subscribe. And when you're on Owen's channel, it just says bear and then has a bear emoji. So anybody on D Live that has a subscription, they get that
Nice.
Little tag. But anyway, apparently some dark-skinned woman wrote this story for the Matrix, and apparently the trans sisters, the Wachowski trans. I don't want to say trannies. I don't like that word. Not that it's a bad word. It's just it doesn't suffice. I want to say something else, dude. There was that stuff's all laying to the side over there because I had to retrieve a bat that randomly attacked me. Not attacked me. I know I was on stream. It didn't actually attack me, but it flew by me and then it crawled on the floor and then it crawled up that wall and I caught it. But that was like literally, was that 2 or 3 weeks ago? I was just like, what in the world? But he was sitting on the wall and I was like, whoa. Also, you can see the nails from the zip board. I mean, it's not something, wouldn't surprise you. It just kind of caught me by surprise. I was like, oh, well, look at that. It's not surprising at all. It makes perfect sense. But the nails, you can see all the nails.
The little...
Yeah, from shooting the zip board. How dare you? How dare you? Have you seen the original video for the how dare you? It's like a actual transvestite, green-haired, black dude in a wheelchair with, I guess, cerebral palsy, which obviously isn't funny. The fact that it's all those things put together is amazing that somebody can fit.
Disabled, trans, black, green-haired. Yeah. Sure.
Or cis. I don't know. I don't know. No, it wouldn't be cis. Cis is the derogatory term they developed for straight people.
No, cisgender is
right?
Multiple genders.
See, I thought cisgender meant normal. What is this? I thought cis male is a stereotypical straight male. Isn't that what that means?
I don't think so. I thought cisgender was they don't claim a gender. Like they're...
I don't know. It's too confusing.
I don't care either.
Yeah. But this green-haired black guy that has cerebral palsy, I guess. What is? I see the words. I just don't know what they mean.
You have there's a hierarchy of like who can oppress who.
Okay, I get it now. Yeah, so like Oh, so maybe
You get to like the
this
people
guy
that
is.
are at the top of the
You know what
oppression
would make
hierarchy
the
get to make up
best?
the dumb words that.
What would be best is if this guy was Semitic. If he was a Semitic black, green-haired,
He's at the top
transgendered,
of the oppression hierarchy.
he needs to be Semitic, and that would be that's poppet.
Cisgender.
Cisgender. That's
Cisgender.
what.
Poppet. It's a cis poppet.
Ooh,
Cisgender.
yucky. That's disgust. That's some gross imagery.
It is, but accurate.
Biblical Joseph. But thank you for that. Um,
I mean, the cisgender whole crap is we'll call them the unfriends.
So I shared
for the sake of censorship.
You said unfriends.
The unfriends.
So I shared my random
that
thought about
movement.
Inception. So we'll move on from that because that was just a. I wanted to share that at least in the company of somebody that gets stuff, and Charles gets it. So I'm gonna crank up a little bit higher. There we go. Crank up a little bit there.
I'm gonna stay right where I'm at.
Yeah, we've got the camera angled for you pretty well. It's only catching a little bit of the wood on the ground, but
meh.
It's all good. Ain't nothing but a thing. As we hang out here in good old-fashioned ex-Osama bin Laden's cave.
It's true.
In the middle of Iowa.
Well,
because you know he was in the CIA.
Allegedly, ex Osama bin Laden.
Because he was a CIA operative.
So.
No, you definitely. That's crazy talk. Why? Why would
a 6'8" Arab that's on dialysis commit the most atrocious crime in the world when his family is intimately connected with the Bush family?
Why would America
joint oil field production between the two families? His family was in Colorado on the day that it.
Why would they have decided to make the enemy of America anyone that ever had employment?
With the
how
CIA.
do you choose? We're gonna pick a person to represent. Something about that just really doesn't add up. This isn't, and this sounds relatively anti-conspiratorial in what I'm saying, even though what I'm saying is on a topic that's so controversial. It's actually relatively anti-conspiratorial, but it's fact, and that makes it profoundly confusing. So. This guy used to work for us. He's also enemy to America.
Well, I mean, we basically created the Taliban, so it's not that far of a stretch.
Yeah, it's really confusing.
Or not created, we enabled, I should say.
So,
we were best buddies with the Taliban for a long time.
Gave him a lot of money. This is a funny thing. Homestead Bound Bear said, this has definitely been a middle-aged conversation. Listen.
My point rests.
Listen, whippersnapper. Don't make me bend you over my knee.
That sounds weird.
Old people and just wow, thanks.
Well, I mean, old people. It sounds weird when old people.
Old people are awkward from time to time.
Listen, son.
USA must have told Osama, "Nah, kid, we work alone."
Well, interestingly enough, the entirety of the war that's going on in Afghanistan, where the Taliban is enemy number one, was all started over opium. So, yeah.
Okay, so Homestead Bound Bear, USA must have told Biblical Joseph, nothing to see here. Got that right about Osama.
Right. Hey guys, look over here. Nothing's happening.
So, I wanted to talk about this topic, and there's never a better time than right now to talk about things. That's probably false sometimes, but what is up with this image is driving me crazy.
I don't know. That's not what you wanted.
Oh, it's a fragment. Okay. No, it isn't. It's just I wondered what was going on, and now I figured it out. I figured it out! Ownership. So, what is the value?
That's why you asked the question you asked the other day.
Which part?
Ownership.
I'm talking about farm unity.
Well, yeah, I get that. But I also get the root of your question the other day where you said, does God own everything?
Oh, that's not what I was. That's not where that was coming from at all. If you're making connections, that is either a blind spot or there are no connections. I wasn't asking that question related to femininity.
Well, because I've gone back through
I was okay. We're gonna take
ownership.
a pause on farmunity.
No, it relates. It relates.
But this topic of does God own everything is an interesting topic as it relates to things like hell, for instance. But I'm sure other things. But go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Um, when it comes to the legality of ownership,
Don't forget that's your personal
yeah.
game. Go ahead.
My personal game. When it comes to legality of ownership, you can't own anything. Like, and they know that. The people that are in charge of this whole governmental system that we live in, governed by statutes and blah 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 blah, know that there's no such thing as ownership because you can't own a resource. You can't own land. You can't. It's
That's
given
exact.
to you.
It's funny. You're saying that's what biblical Joseph just said. You don't own.
Yeah.
Pay the tax and we'll let you use it.
Yeah. You don't own anything, and they know you can't own anything, which is why they can charge you taxes on it, because they don't own it either. They're just basically charging you rent on a space, because we were given stewardship of it by God.
Well,
because He owns it. He's
hypothetically, this is the way I've looked at it, and I could be, believe it or not, I could be wrong. When I say ownership on our earth as it's been constructed has to do with who can protect an area, and in as much as you can protect that area, in as much as you have the ability to protect an area, is to the extent that you own that area. So, in that regard, in relation to God, we own nothing.
In a mental game.
But in regard to this
legally, though,
earth, okay, go ahead. I don't know much about this. Where you're going with legal?
Legally, like as in governed by law.
It's contract based, isn't it?
It is, but legally they don't own it, so they can't give it to you.
So
they can't charge you for it. They
so
can't
a
sell
national
it.
park in the United States of America is not owned by America as a resource of the GDP. Is that what you're trying to tell me?
No. From a law base.
Well, is that because
America
there's not
can't even own it?
Is that because there's not a worldwide law?
It's a national
establishment.
It is a resource. You can't own a resource. Like,
then how do they find people for collecting rainwater?
Because they make a statute that says you can't own rainwater. They can't stop you from collecting it. They can just make it illegal according to their law.
Okay.
God never said you can't own rainwater. You can't collect rainwater.
Island photographer, who, by the way, is a long-standing bear, if I'm not mistaken.
What's up, Island photographer?
You know his?
No. I'm just saying what's up.
Yeah, he just said 45. Oh, you're
45 is middle age. Yeah. Yep. But
okay, you can't own it.
God is the only one that can own anything. He's given us governorship.
Yeah, what does dominion mean? Because he obviously gave us the ability to have dominion, much as he does, in a like fashion to the way that he does. But what is that? How is dominion different than ownership? Maybe I should ask it that way.
Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
Is fishing illegal?
The act of fishing is not illegal. You need a permit in many places in order to fish. Is this the same as the driving conversation? Is driving illegal?
Yeah, it is. Fishing is illegal in the United States.
But there are locations where you don't need a permit. Even on your what about private property?
On your private property, quote unquote,
yeah,
fishing is not illegal. Yeah. However, if you were to break DNR, they can come and confiscate your property from you. If you were to break any laws or statutes from DNR, they can come and take your private property away from you. So did you own it in the first place?
Did you own what?
The
I'm
private
sorry.
property.
They can take away your private property if what? I missed part
Like,
because I was reading
okay,
a
let's put
comment.
it this way. Poaching. If I kill a deer on my own land out of season,
Okay.
they can confiscate my property.
Really?
It's my land. Why don't I own everything on it?
Because they've alleged, or not alleged, they've made it so that anything that comes on is because that deer didn't. If it was, how could you prove that the deer was born?
You're like the fourth level of Inception right now.
What I just said.
Yeah, you just took 5 steps back, all in the same thought process.
Yeah. If a deer was born, raised, and dies on your land, then that would be absurd. But I think that where they're justifying their thing of we can take everything away from you because you violated us is because that deer didn't necessarily get born and raised on your property. Therefore, you don't have claim to that deer.
Who granted them the authority to make that?
To make the law that you're affecting the ecosystem and all that. Who gave them that authority?
If it was born, raised, and it's irrelevant. If the deer was born, raised, and dies on my property at my hands, it's irrelevant. It does not. They don't care one whit.
So what about if it's a pet?
If it's livestock, if it's regulated livestock,
so it's got to be certified somehow.
Yeah.
So which is different.
It's Now, if
then you could blow its head off.
Yeah, then you can kill it however you want to, which makes no sense either. But because it's a
blow its head off is
kind of gruesome. And that's what I mean. Like, but they can't own a natural resource.
Where's it? Biblical Joseph? Where are you from? Are you in Sweden right now? He said half of my income goes to tax. No, I guess if you were in Sweden, it'd be like 89% of my income goes to sorry, half of my income goes to tax just to stay on property. My family stewardship for stewarded. I'm guessing steward for over 100 years, even before this state became a state. What are you in Alaska?
Hmm.
What's another state that it's fine. I don't need to know where you're at, but it's all good. But half sounds sorry. Don't want to offend anybody. But half sounds a little high.
No, not really.
It's a joke. It's a joke.
He could
sounds a little high.
Yeah. Okay.
It sounds a little high.
But I mean, I'm just saying, like, and this is what it comes back to: is it's like you can't make fishing illegal.
So North Dakota is under 100 years old. Is what Island Photographer is.
But you can't make fishing illegal, is what I mean. Like, you don't own the fish, you don't own the water, you can't own a resource. But the government
I don't understand why you can't own a resource.
Because
isn't everything a resource? That's paper. That's a resource.
Let me put it this way. The gimmick is that a national park doesn't belong to you. The national park doesn't belong to me. The national park belongs to everyone.
Okay.
Okay,
that's what they say.
Yeah, that's their claim. Is that
as a citizen, it's a resource for your availability.
Me.
Sure.
So how can it be illegal for me to do something on land that I publicly own?
To protect that which 300 and something other million people also lay claim to.
Exactly. But why don't I get a voice in how that's regulated then?
Well, that's a good question. Is that a fact that you don't get a voice to speak as to how it's regulated?
Well, I can tell you right now, I don't have enough money to have a voice for that.
I can't argue that. I don't know much about that, but I would say that hypothetically there are ways to impact. At least there's probably some painted path as to how you could influence legislature on the national park system.
Possibly.
But I mean, I don't know for sure. But anyway, got to pay for that education.
The indoctrination, I think, is the word you meant to use.
Unless you're the queen and own all the swans. Now
this is where like the law starts to make sense. Or like as you dive deeper and deeper into Commonwealth law and maritime law and martial law and all the different types of law that ensue, and how they're regulated. Well, and let me put it this way: there is no law other than what God established. God established a law already, and it's like if the more you dig into the legality of law,
Mm-hmm.
and how they phrase everything, it's all statutes, it's all judgments, uh, it's all just a ruse to steal authority and power from you, like as a citizen of the world, I guess you could say.
So this is relatively higher level stuff
Yeah.
in regards to the, but I like to operate. This is all the, I don't want to call it theoretical because it's very, very practically what the life and world that we live in, what you're discussing. But on the other hand, it doesn't necessarily provide value for how we ought to live our life
No,
as
but
a
it
consequence
does.
of those facts.
It does, like, and this is the thing, is like, I understand paying a tax when you buy something.
Homestead bound bear is getting taxed $332,000 for 2019. Small business.
Yeah.
That's
Sizable chunk of
too
money.
much. Well, I say that I say that it's too much. I don't know what your total, like, let's say if you're I think I know some of the tiers. So I would say that as a small business, if your profit as a business is under 10 million, that should probably be labeled as a small business. If your profit exceeds 10 million, I think that you're probably needing to be classified in a different way. But I'd say that if your profit is under 10 million, you should still be classified as a small business. And 8 employees. Yeah, that is small. That is pretty small. The business I work for, I'm the number 3 employee of 3. There's 3 employees. I'm the third hired on this small company that's only been around for 10 years, I believe. No, 20. 10. 10, 12, 20. It's been around for somewhere between 10 and 20 years. It's all good. It doesn't matter. But it's a pretty small business. And yeah, 332, it's a lot. But I would say a business that brings in 9.99 million profit. I don't know what their gross and everything, but let's say it's 9.99. It would make sense to be taxed at or around 10%. But I disagree with the whole tax system in the first place. I really think that sales tax, I think if you eliminate all income tax and just do the straight sales tax at, I think a 20% straight sales tax across the board from Learjet to condominium to everything, just all sales tax was just 20%, then you'd have people not buying anything. No, it doesn't work that way. Folks need stuff. Everybody, rich, poor, everybody needs stuff.
But that's my point. Is it's like, if I own something, why do I have to pay a tax on it?
Yeah, I know. This is that discussion, but my point is, my question is, what is the value of? Let's just set aside the nonsense that's associated with the taxing. Just setting that aside, what is the value, in your own words or mind, of owning a piece of property as opposed to, let's balance it with renting or leasing, or even, what's the word for it, like entering into a contract. So for instance, there's times where you can talk to somebody that has 5,000 acres and you're like, hey, I want I want to use 5 of the acres of your land. I'm gonna be just off in a far off place on your land. I'd like to build a home. I'd like to build a pathway to my home. I'd like to build some um, gardens, a greenhouse, and possibly a warehouse. Everything's going to be sound structurally and to code, but I hope that increases your value. But I'd like to. I don't know. I've thought about this concept of entering into agreement with somebody, and my brain breaks every time because I'm like, how? Maybe because it's so outside of my perspective. But let's just. I'm gonna follow. We've got
Thought experiment here.
it is a thought experiment because we understand how leasing works, right? Because you're paying for something while you use it, and renting, same thing. We get that. I think all of us can understand that system. I have been trying to work through the thought experiment of entering into an agreement with somebody that is agreeable to this idea. Let's say they agree to this. I'm not sure why they would, based on the confusing nature of this thought experiment, because it is confusing to me. But let's say this person is agreeable. My question is, and this is good for you to hear and answer to. You've got you build your home, you build the road, you build the warehouse, you build the greenhouse. You have increased the value of this property. Now, leases have a term. Renting sometimes will have a term. This agreement to use the land, the question is, Island Photographer says trust isn't easy. Trust is a massive aspect of this thought experiment that I've been working through. But here's the question. Do you own it? The concept within this thought experiment is the concept that you do not own it. However, with that being said, let's say you do not own it. You built the home. You paid for the home. You built the warehouse. When I say warehouse, I'm talking about like a garage, like a workshop. That's what I'm thinking of. When I say warehouse, that's what I'm meaning to say workshop. You built the greenhouse. You did all of that. You put all the money into that. They didn't contribute at all. They just allowed you to use their land. When it's all said and done, or we could work it out logical progression, and you go to death, right? But let's say like you're 90 years old, blah blah blah, and you've got children, grandchildren that hypothetically wish they had claim and right, because I think it's about rights. But your children, let's say they wished that they had the right to also use that land. Well, at this point, the original owner has also grown potentially in age with you, but it doesn't have to be that. Let's say you build the home, you build the workshop, you build the greenhouse, and you die. Whether it's the whole family dying instantaneously or just like the head of the household, the man, obviously. But seriously, the man dies. This can no longer be sustained. The wife, and let's say kids are involved, have to move on because they cannot sustain the necessary function of making this home work, right? Hypothetically, they have to move in with family somewhere. Let's just say. Well, the question here in this thought experiment is what would happen? Worst case and ideally, because I'd like to kind of hear both. What would happen ideally and what would happen worst case to the property? Now, this wife, the widow, does she get... Now, my mind obviously goes to the original owner and or new owner of the big property. Just says, I'm going to sell it and you're going to get a massive amount of the proceeds minus my cost of what, was the land. That's one way it could go, right?
Why would they sell it?
Because they also can't, hypothetically, let's just say they can't maintain it. So it's actually most advantageous.
But what's the loss for them to just let it sit?
Degradation. Or, the degrading of the property that would eventually turn to ruins if it was not
But they
maintained.
didn't lose anything out on it. They didn't spend any money investing in any of the infrastructure.
Well, so here's the difference is...
Why would they give you my point is for them,
it would degrade their property.
Sell a piece of their own property
because it would degrade their property to let it ruin as opposed to blink. So it's worse
Let's say
to have land
hypothetically,
with a crap
were
thing
they
on it.
using it before,
No,
and they're not currently planning on doing anything with it now?
correct.
So why,
Hypothetically,
rather
in
than
this
just
in this
let it
thought experiment.
sit,
Thank you.
just theorizing here, rather than not, rather than selling it and doing and get like selling a piece of their property that otherwise they didn't put any money into, they're not losing any money from. Why would they sell it, lose a piece of property, and give you anything rather than just have you leave and keep it there and just
Okay,
rent it to somebody?
let's say it's a burden. I'll add this. Let's say it's a burden to the original big owner, even though it's relatively illogical. He's giving me tons of shekels. He thinks that's thank you though. So let's say it's a burden to the original owner, even though that is absurd. But there's tax again, back to the taxes. So it's more advantageous for them to sell this portion of the property that they let these people use, because otherwise they're going to.
Why not rent it to someone else?
Well, they could do that, but here. Oh, so let's say they do that. Here's the point: who has the right to the money that it brings in? The widow or the owner?
Depends on what the stipulations of your agreement were.
Yes.
And whether you ironed that out at the beginning or not.
So yeah, but
that they either have to pay you a fair value for the property,
which
value for the
is
property,
like ownership.
ish.
That's my point. Is
well, and
you come to the end of your.
Either have to pay you.
You come to the end of your life, and your children are looking at what they were raised in. They look at what you built, and then if they don't have the freedom or the ability, let's just put it this way: if they don't have the ability financially to buy it, it's this. That's what I mean by ownership in a system of. There's something really awkward about somebody that has tons of land. If it's not given to you at some point in the that you earn it, that you buy it, that something, because ownership of land obviously is talked about in the Bible. The kingdom of heaven studies is like a man that found a treasure in the field, sells everything he has so that he can buy that plot of land. Then he gains right to that thing, right? Obviously, it's just a parable, but on the other hand, that parable is not a nonsensical thing. It's referring to a system of land ownership that's been around for obviously thousands of years. So my point is, I can't conceptualize how it would be. How it would be.
It would all come back
good.
to how the contract was structured, though.
Yeah, but what about the kids? It doesn't matter. So, like, I mean, this is a whole different topic about what we leave our children.
Well, that's what I mean. It would be part of the contract, and therefore
stipulated. Better stated, and it better be part of the contract.
Well, yeah,
it better be part of the agreement.
If the owner were to,
because otherwise,
not the owner, but the caretaker of said property who was leasing it.
This reminds me of
leaser
estate debate.
Leasee.
This is the debate of an estate.
Yeah.
that runs into decades sometimes of war between family members.
Well, that's where you'd have where you'd have to be like, if I die, then my next of kin has the right to do it, or you have to give next of kin X market value for blah, blah, blah.
I guess the big question is, I've heard stories of people allowing other families to develop the land that they own for free because it raises their property value. But the mystery there for me is, what about all of that they put into it? Is it just all lost, or is it you got what you got and you? I guess it's a disproportionate thing in this scenario, because you've got, let's say, 10,000 an acre, but you put, and let's say it's 5 acres, so 50 grand. So, but if you increase the value of that 50 grand to 300 grand, and you are like, well, I got what I got, the free use of that land, so this is yours. Well, you just gave, I mean, then you factor in inflation and all this other stuff, and what it would have cost you to take a loan for 50,000. It wouldn't have cost you 300 grand, though. It would have cost you 120, worst case. So there's still an issue there of,
Well, that's where if you structured the contract as less any cash value incurred,
yeah,
basically,
I
like,
hear what you're saying.
so you're only going to get out of it what you put into it, not the actual value,
But
because they retained the value on their property.
the point is, from a logical standpoint, the contract, as we're calling
So
it,
they
the
would
agreement,
they would just get the equity out of it at that point because they're the landowner.
yeah, the contract, as we're calling it, must lead to a version of
What you own,
equity,
like
equity share,
what you own on his property.
Earned equity.
Yeah, who takes the earned
I
equity?
earned, as the 5,000 acre owner, I earned what the benefits of giving you something, and that is reckoned to me as value.
Yeah,
Because I did this, and it's an investment. I gave you something like an investment to a bank. You used it. It benefited me in this way. I deserve something for what I gave you.
well, yeah,
That makes sense. On the other hand, the people that fed into it in the reverse also earned. So in this concept of a contract, because this is a nitty gritty detail of the farm unity thing that has been most highly debated amongst some of our friends, and it is the concept of how to negotiate the equity share of a thing, and I think that it is a crucial. So
yeah, I see
for
what you're
all
getting at
intents
there.
and purposes, guys,
So if I
let me give them a brief rundown of the concept of farm unity,
okay,
and then let you go. So farm unity is this concept of a plot of land, let's say somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 120, somewhere in a manageable, because we don't, obviously you could say 10,000, but no, anyway, just go with 40 to 120. Okay. And a handful of families working together on this property, developing it and their own homestead, okay, collectively and somehow individually, in as much that this concept that we're discussing that over the past 15, 20 minutes is relevant. And it can't help but be relevant because life happens. So equity share is one of the relatively lingering elements of the final details of um, how to manage it. The way that I saw it in a recent daydream, and I don't want to cut your, because you were going to go off on something. Do you want me to hold my thought?
no, it's fine. But basically, the way that I've structured it in my head, anyways, is that basically you're not being charged anything to live there, per se. But you are going to obviously input some of money, maybe. But then, like, let's just say, hypothetically, tomorrow I become a multimillionaire, right? And I pay for literally everything. All the house construction, all the land construction, and it's just free to use. Do you then incur equity for the work that you've done in improving the land, tilling it, creating profit from the land, or is it just an immediate, as soon as whatever you've created gets sold, you reap a value for it immediately? Or is it an invested?
So this is a whole chicken and egg kind of thing in regards to how it gets started. Um, that could be a complicating detail, but if everybody goes in collectively,
Yeah.
it's a different thing. So it kind of depends on how it gets started. But what I was imagining is a plot of land that you have a concept of a quote unquote a planned neighborhood, as
Yeah.
many neighborhoods are planned. In
It's just
fact,
it's more of a private community more than anything.
so either at the head or at the base of the property, and I'm not talking about elevation necessarily, but more so the start of the neighborhood or at the end. I can't think about, I'm not sure which would be better, because I've thought about it different ways. Um, Good luck if you read a lot of communes around too many chiefs. If you if it worked, you'd see a lot of communes around too many. Oh yeah, and it doesn't. The
Yeah.
commune thing is, yeah,
Well, that's why it couldn't be one
lease to own
person.
contract is what Homestead Bound Bear mentioned. Yes, and that's kind of what he was getting onto for a moment in regards to the equity share that you gain as you put into the system.
Well,
My
and that would be, and the contract would have to be structured in such a way that it's like, okay, if you're going to leave,
I was thinking about it like this.
yeah.
You've got property, 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 and then either at the top or the bottom, front or the back, you have a co-op LLC. Co-op meaning shared ownership, where the primary community center is, where the a barn is, where a playground is, where the coffee shop is, a small little cluster of the business,
Hmm.
and then everybody else is doing their, like, one guy really loves doing vegetable gardening. Another guy really loves the idea of doing chickens. Another dude over here might not care much about any of this, but he's doing dog breeding, but he can lend a hand. He just loves dogs and he wants to do dog breeding. It doesn't have much to do with farming necessarily, but he also, is happy to lend a hand. Now, the owned equity, or the shared ownership of this co-op cluster of things that operate as a business is something that,
So
you
almost like a farmer's market front end.
yes,
Yeah.
where everybody contributes to somehow, some way. The dog breeder dude that isn't really a farmer, but that's just his hobby, or a woodworker or whatever. Let's, you know he's just, I don't know, the dog breeding thing seems the most arbitrary and non-contributory, but that dude might be the guy that gives the most time running the storefront, or whatever. There's some type of, but and he has obviously a desire to have ownership in the co-op. This is just what I was doing the thought experiment of how each of these people owns their own property, but everybody is collectively working together for the sake of the co-op um, business.
But see,
Whereas
the thing
all
is
the
like,
development is getting focused on that, and then sub developments of greenhouses and grazing. Some guy over here might have some pigs or cows or whatever. Um, those are the different, sheep, goats, whatever. I don't know. That's another way. The other idea of a single owner granting access, then you have to work out what, and that's a difficult thing to work out what that contract looks like, because, for instance, if that single owner were to pass, that whole thing could fall apart for 7 families. But if everybody has their own situation going on, but then everybody is collectively working, this kind of, what this kind of reminds me of?
hmm,
The church.
yeah.
Because when there's a single boss, the preacher, it kind of can suck. It looks like a business. And I
Yeah.
know I mentioned business in the co-op idea, but it's a little different because it's a co-op and it won't work unless everybody is working. There's not a boss. It's more of a collective operation.
Well, and that's the thing is that's what I always get asked is like, who's in charge of it? Like
Yes.
there isn't an in charge person. Like the whole point is to not have a person in charge, because that's the model that I wanted to follow, was like the church is just doing
Okay, I
the
watched
church
this
doing the church's job.
city and state tax people out of old farms 20 years back. Yeah, yeah. The tax thing can definitely work against you. Off default now, it's a multi-million-dollar business. Biblical terms, subjective beauty and the good luck. If it, okay, comment. How about the government just gives land away to the poor in federal land funds? There's a lot of how about and weird, confusing things. They used to do it all of the time. People used to get free land almost everywhere. Nearly the entire Midwest and the West is is full of properties, probably this one included. This entire town that we're sitting in was probably all properties that were given by the government. I mean, maybe people bought the land, but I have a pretty strong feeling that these towns popped up because the government was like, here's some land, you 30 people or you 80 people,
With the stipulation of you have to form a municipality.
Go make this town, just there you go. uh, some of you guys know about the history of that stuff better than me, obviously, but well, it's not obvious that you know better. I know that there are people that know stuff way better than me.
Interesting.
Anyway, they can give you anything. They can give you can be taken. That's true in a lot of different ways. Someone is always going to be the most and least productive. Yes.
Yeah,
that's true.
That's true.
That's why, in my concept, if everybody has their own ownership, quote unquote ownership, as the norm, in the normal functioning of the word ownership, right? They own their names on the deed.
But I mean,
and
there has to be a.
But then if they're not contributing to the co-op, then they're fired, quote unquote.
But I mean, that's where it is. As a community, it has to be a collective, and like everybody has to have a certain amount of rights, because again, it can't be a central ownership. Like, so one person has to say all, and
it creates a lot of awkwardness when that's the case.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying is, let's say our dog breeder dude, that I don't know who this is, by the way, for any of you that love dog breeding, but this pretend dog breeder dude, let's say he ends up being, he seemed like a cool guy, totally on board, but somehow, he was the one that slipped through, and he's a loser. He doesn't show up on time. He makes customers angry, and he's just causing a mess. And intervention and prayer and whatever else isn't working, and he's just not helpful. So we wouldn't want him working in the shop, but that also means that anything that he financially contributed to the co-op, it has to be bought out. That's what I mean by the equity ownership.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you have 5 shares, bro, and we're all gonna buy a share, but then that comes to an issue of the whole, what's a quorum, what's a unanimous, does it need to be a unanimous decision? What if 4 out of 5 can't? Does that mean that number 4 has to buy 2?
Strictly majority.
Yeah, I mean, the majority thing can be helpful, but it's the equity thing, and how to negotiate a situation where someone, and is right, there will always be somebody that contributes less. That isn't always so. What's a good example of this?
A doctor.
Oh, because they only help like twice a year.
They only are needed when there's an emergency.
But their value
is very high.
Yeah.
So they may contribute less, but if you don't have them, it can be awful.
And we all agree that nurses are better than doctors.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just mean like medical. Medical is a field that is needed, but it's not always.
All right, let's see.
Or even for the sake of a dog breeder, could potentially be breeding dogs all year round. So could a farmer that breeds
quantifying
sheep.
That sweat equity would be a nightmare.
Yeah.
Homestead bound bear. the sweat equity, quantifying the sweat equity, it would be. It would be. That's
Which
why
is why, like,
it's
the sweat equity part of it, it could only be assessed as real value. Like,
yeah, you've got to factor in
your sweat equity is worthless if you spent 107,000 hours growing tomatoes and never actually grew a tomato. Like,
so of
it's
course there's that.
worthless.
But here's how you
But did
factor it
you
in.
get
Let's
107,000 tomatoes out of it?
the
Well, that
dog
has a real
breeder
value.
if the dog breeder is volunteering 40 hours a week to run the one of the gift shops or whatever, that's equated down to the $400 a week or some type of wage.
There would be an agreed upon value for that wage.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, okay, so you've worked 40 hours. You're
Hi,
entitled
Miranda.
you're entitled to an equivalent wage there.
I don't know how long my connection will last, but nice to see you. What's the topic? We were talking about midlife, but then we got onto Farmunity after a couple of really
We're gonna
random
probably have to wrap it up pretty quick.
topics.
It's almost 7.
Good call. It is. Yeah, it is 7. This is a very important topic.
We will be revisiting this. This is fascinating.
My husband's grandfather received free land from the government as long as they worked it here in Canada. They still do that in Canada and Alaska. And there's about 5 states in America. 3 of those 5, let's see, Nebraska, Minnesota, Iowa, Kansas are absolutely states currently that will give you land. Now, not a lot. It's like quarter acre, half acre, stuff like that. But they'll give you land to build a home. Now, as long as there's one that you have to build a business and you get the land for free.
As long as it has to be profitable within a certain amount of years.
Well, one of them just said all you have to do is create a business that provides a job, which was kind of cool. But and they'll give you free land for that. And then there was a place in New York, and there's like a couple of other random places that have popped up that have done that. So it still happens, but which is why money came about. Yep, money. I think Doc only spent long time in schools just to learn Latin and drugs, overpriced. Yeah. The doctor versus the nurse. Yeah. My husband and I are looking at joining an organization that protects owners' rights back to the original deed. That is a rough topic because yeah.
Oh, what's up, Miranda? I haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, but Charles. We're green screening. See, I have this technology that allows me to do this right there. It's pretty cool.
It's Star Wars. It's futuristic. Even though
it's weird.
Oh, no, wait. It's pastoristic. Sorry, Star Wars. It's a long time ago, even though it looks like the future. It's irrelevant.
Oh, in a galaxy a long time ago. That's how they're able to tell the stories, because they already happened a long time.
Yeah.
I get it.
So,
and that's why they're all humans that haven't evolved or something.
No, but they have in the past. Does that mean that we devolved?
I don't understand. It's very confusing. But anyway, thank you, Charles. Thank you guys. 11 of you that wound up showing up.
We'll revisit this topic for sure, because it's fascinating.
Feel free to do the subscribe thing or whatever you want to do. It's all good times. I'm on D Live for those of you that don't already know. This is D Live and YouTube and Twitch, actually. So it's all good. But you can also find Charles, Breath of Fresh Bear, on YouTube. He ain't about that D Live life yet. If you don't have the deed in hand, the bank owns your stuff, not you.
This is what I was getting into.
So why don't they pay the taxes? Yeah, no. Do banks don't have to pay taxes when they own a piece of property? It's a loophole.
Mm-hmm.
So what you need to do is start a bank, which is probably way harder than anything else in the universe. But if you could do
technically, you can with your birth certificate, because it's a corporation.
But a bank. You could follow.
Yeah, you can open a bank in your birth certificate.
And then give the land to the bank and then never pay taxes on it.
Theoretically.
If that was possible, you know people would already be doing that.
There are people in Britain that have gotten away with it. not ever paying taxes on their property again because they win the court case.
With a bank situation?
Produce the original deed with a wet signature on it. They can't. I own my property. I owe you nothing.
Which is what she was talking
Yeah.
about. Okay, let's go on. If you don't have the deed in hand,
Welcome.
the bank owns your okay, yes. Thanks for your yes.
Same to you, Miranda. Same to you, Agape.
Totally circles, but honest talk. Thanks, guys.
We talk in circles. I guess is the way. That's the way I'm. Yeah.
It hurts.
Yeah, we do though.
It hurts.
All right, guys. We'll check you later.
Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and I will hopefully see you guys soon. It's up in the air. Stuff happens. Life happens.
Yes, it does.